Millionaire's wife insulted her housekeeper until she found out her secret identity. She stood there in her designer heels, looking down at the woman scrubbing her marble floors, completely unaware that she was about to make the biggest mistake of her privileged life. What started as another day of cruel insults and demeaning treatment would end with a revelation so shocking, it would bring this millionaire's wife to her knees. But what happened next, no one could have predicted. Meet Victoria Sterling, a wife of tech mogul James Sterling, living in their $15 million mansion in Beverly Hills. Victoria had everything money could buy: designer clothes, luxury cars, and a staff of servants to cater to her every whim. But what she lacked was something no amount of money could purchase: basic human decency. For 3 years, Maria had worked as the Sterling family's housekeeper. Every morning at 6 a.m. sharp, she would arrive at the imposing gates of the Sterling estate, ready to clean, organize, and maintain the sprawling mansion. Maria was quiet, hardworking, and always wore the same simple gray uniform that Victoria had specifically chosen to remind the help of their place. Victoria treated Maria like she was invisible, or worse, like she was beneath notice entirely. She would throw her expensive purses on freshly mopped floors just to watch Maria clean them again. She'd leave messes deliberately, dropping food on carpets and spilling wine on white furniture, all while wearing that cruel smile that said she could do whatever she wanted because she paid the bills. "Maria." Victoria's voice would echo through the marble hallways like a whip crack. "These windows are streaked. Do them again. And this time try to do it right." Maria would simply nod, gather her supplies, and start over without a word of complaint. The other staff members, the chef, the gardener, the driver, they all witnessed Victoria's treatment of Maria, and they felt sick about it. But they needed their jobs, and everyone knew that crossing Victoria Sterling meant finding yourself on the street. What none of them knew, what Victoria couldn't even imagine in her wildest dreams, was that Maria harbored a secret that would soon turn their entire world upside down. The morning that changed everything started like any other. Victoria was hosting her monthly charity luncheon, one of those society events where wealthy women gathered to write checks and feel good about themselves while gossiping about everyone who wasn't in the room. The guest list included the wives of senators, CEOs, and old money families whose names graced buildings throughout Los Angeles. Victoria had been planning this event for weeks, obsessing over every detail because it was her chance to prove she belonged in the upper echelons of high society. The mansion had to be perfect, the food had to be flawless, and most importantly, the help had to be invisible. "Maria," Victoria announced that morning, her voice dripping with disdain, "I want you to understand something very clearly. Today is important. Very important. You will not speak unless spoken to, you will not make eye contact with my guests, and you will stay in the background where you belong. These are important people, and I won't have someone like you embarrassing me." Maria looked up from polishing the silver, meeting Victoria's cold stare for just a moment. "Yes, Mrs. Sterling. I understand." "Good. And make sure you use the service entrance. I don't want my guests to see the help coming and going through the front door like they own the place." As Maria returned to her work, something flickered across her face, not anger, not hurt, but something else entirely. Something that, if Victoria had been paying attention, might have given her pause. The guests began arriving at noon in a parade of Tesla Model S's and BMWs. Victoria glided between them in her $1,000 dress, accepting air kisses and compliments about her adorable home. The conversation flowed from their children's private school achievements to their husbands' latest business deals to their upcoming trips to their vacation homes in the Hamptons and Aspen. Maria moved through the gathering like a shadow, refilling water glasses and clearing plates, just as invisible as Victoria had demanded. But if any of these society ladies had really looked, at the woman serving them, they might have noticed something remarkable about her bearing, her posture, the quiet confidence in the way she carried herself despite the humble uniform. It was during the main course that disaster struck, though at first it seemed like just another opportunity for Victoria to demonstrate her cruelty. Mrs. Pemberton, wife of a prominent real estate developer, was regaling the table with stories about her recent art acquisition when Maria approached to refill her wine glass. Perhaps it was the way the light caught the crystal, or maybe Maria's hand trembled just slightly, but somehow the wine spilled, just a few drops, but enough to stain Mrs. Pemberton's white silk blouse. The table fell silent. All eyes turned to Maria, who stood frozen with the wine bottle still in her hand, her face pale with mortification. Victoria's face turned crimson with rage. Here was her worst nightmare playing out in front of the very people she was trying to impress. "You clumsy fool," she screamed, her voice echoing through the dining room. "Look what you've done." She shot up from her chair, her napkin falling to the floor as she jabbed her finger at Maria. "This is exactly what I was talking about. You people can't be trusted with anything valuable, can you? You're too stupid to handle simple tasks like pouring wine without making a mess." The guests shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Even by their standards, Victoria was going too far. But Victoria was just getting started. 3 years of treating Maria like dirt had built up to this moment, and she was going to make the most of it. "I should have known better than to let someone like you anywhere near my guests. You're nothing but a maid, a servant, and you'll never be anything more than that because you don't have the breeding, the intelligence, or the class to be anything else." Maria stood there, taking every word, her hands folded in front of her as Victoria's voice grew louder and more vicious. "You should be grateful I even let someone like you work in a house like this. Do you have any idea how lucky you are? Most people like you would kill for the chance to see how real people live." The silence that followed was deafening. Mrs. Pemberton dabbed at her blouse, clearly embarrassed by Victoria's outburst. The other guests stared at their plates, unsure of how to react to such a display. And then something extraordinary happened. Maria slowly raised her head, and when she looked at Victoria, her eyes held something they had never held before. Not fear, not submission, but a quiet strength that seemed to fill the entire room. "Mrs. Sterling," Maria said softly, her voice carrying a refined accent that none of them had ever heard before, "I believe there's something you should know." Victoria laughed harshly. "Oh, now you want to talk back? Now you think you have something to say?" "Yes," Maria replied, and suddenly her posture was different, straighter, more commanding. "I think it's time I told you exactly who I am." She reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out her phone. With a few quick taps, she placed it on the table in front of Victoria, the screen facing up. Victoria glanced down dismissively, then looked again. Her face went white. On the screen was a Forbes magazine cover from 2 years earlier. The headline read, "Maria Gonzalez Rivera, the billionaire philanthropist who started from nothing." And there, smiling confidently from the cover in an elegant business suit, was Maria. Their Maria. The room exploded into whispers as the guests craned their necks to see the phone. Mrs. Pemberton gasped, recognizing the face immediately. "Oh my God," she whispered. That's Maria Gonzalez Rivera. The Maria Gonzalez Rivera." Victoria's hands trembled as she picked up the phone, staring at the image as if it might disappear. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of joke, some kind of trick. But as Maria began to speak, her voice transformed completely. Gone was the quiet, subservient tone she had used for 3 years. In its place was the confident, articulate voice of a woman accustomed to commanding boardrooms and addressing world leaders. "Allow me to properly introduce myself," Maria said, standing tall and proud. "My name is Maria Esperanza Gonzalez Rivera, founder and CEO of Rivera Industries, one of the largest construction and development companies in South America. My personal net worth is approximately $2.8 billion. The silence was so complete that you could hear Victoria's Cartier watch ticking. Maria continued, her eyes never leaving Victoria's stunned face. 3 years ago, my daughter Sophia was killed in a car accident caused by a drunk driver. She was 25 years old, brilliant, beautiful, and she was going to change the world. After her funeral, I fell into a depression so deep that I couldn't function. I couldn't run my company, couldn't face my responsibilities, couldn't even get out of bed most days. Tears began to flow down Maria's cheeks, but her voice remained steady. My therapist suggested that I needed to find a way to reconnect with humanity, to remember what really mattered in life. So I made a decision that everyone thought was crazy. I left my company in the hands of my board of directors, and I came to Los Angeles to work as a housekeeper. Victoria sank back into her chair as if she'd been physically struck. I chose housekeeping because it was honest work, the kind of work my grandmother did when she first came to this country with nothing but hope and determination. I wanted to experience life from a different perspective, to see how the other half lived, and maybe to find some peace in simple, meaningful labor. Maria's voice grew stronger. I took a job with an agency that promised discretion. They didn't ask questions about my background, and I didn't volunteer information. All they knew was that I was reliable, thorough, and willing to work for much less than their usual rates. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place for the horrified guest. Mrs. Pemberton covered her mouth with her hand. Mrs. Caldwell stared at Maria as if seeing her for the first time. And Victoria? Victoria looked like she might faint. "For 3 years, Maria continued, I have scrubbed your floors, washed your dishes, and endured your insults. And do you know what I learned, Victoria? I learned that wealth doesn't make you a better person. Class isn't something you buy with money, It's something you demonstrate through how you treat others, especially those you perceive as having less power than you. She walked slowly around the table, her presence now commanding the room in a way that no expensive dress or jewelry ever could. Every morning when I put on this uniform, I reminded myself that I was choosing to be here. I could have left at any time, returned to my penthouse, my private jet, my life of luxury. But I stayed because I was learning something valuable about human nature. Victoria found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. What? Why didn't you tell me? Maria smiled, and for the first time in 3 years, it was a smile of genuine warmth mixed with profound sadness. Because I wanted to see who you really were when you thought no one important was watching. And now I know. She pulled out her phone again and showed the screen to the room. It was open to her contact list, displaying names that made several of the guests gasp audibly. World leaders, celebrities, business titans, people whose phone numbers were more valuable than most people's houses. Mrs. Pemberton, Maria said, turning to the woman with the stained blouse, your husband has been trying to get a meeting with me for 6 months. He wants Rivera Industries to partner with him on that waterfront development project. I believe my assistant told him I was taking a sabbatical and wasn't accepting new business proposals. Mrs. Pemberton nodded mutely, her face red with embarrassment and something that might have been shame. Mrs. Caldwell, your son applied for an internship at my company last summer. We rejected his application not because he wasn't qualified, but because we have a strict policy against nepotism. However, I might be willing to reconsider if he reapplies through proper channels. She moved to the next guest. Mrs. Harrison, I believe your husband's charity has been trying to secure a donation from the Rivera Foundation. We typically give $20 million annually to causes that support working families and immigrant rights. With each revelation, the atmosphere in the room grew heavier. These women were realizing that they had just witnessed one of the most powerful people in the world being subjected to racist, classist abuse, and they had said nothing. Finally, Maria turned back to Victoria, who sat slumped in her chair like a deflated balloon. But you, Victoria, you gave me the greatest gift of all. You showed me exactly the kind of person I never want to become, no matter how much money I have or how much power I wield. The room was so quiet that everyone could hear Victoria's ragged breathing. I want you to know, Maria continued, that I don't hate you. Hatred is a poison that destroys the person who carries it, and I've carried enough poison in my life. But I do pity you. Because with all your wealth, all your privilege, all your opportunities, you chose to use your power to make someone else feel small. And that says everything about who you are as a person. Victoria finally found her voice, though it shook with emotion. Maria, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. That's exactly the point, Maria interrupted gently. You didn't know and you didn't care to know. You saw a woman in a uniform and decided that was all she could ever be. You never asked about my life, my dreams, my family, my story. To you, I was just a function, not a person. She picked up her phone from the table and slipped it back into her pocket. I've learned what I came here to learn. Tomorrow morning, I'll be returning to my real life. Rivera Industries has several major projects launching next quarter, and the board has been patient enough with my sabbatical. As she moved toward the service entrance, the same door Victoria had always insisted she use, Maria paused. Ladies, it's been enlightening meeting you. Mrs. Pemberton, please don't worry about the stain. It's just wine and the blouse will wash clean. Some stains are much harder to remove. With that, she walked out of the dining room, leaving behind a table of women who would never forget what they had witnessed. Victoria sat in stunned silence for several minutes after Maria left. Around her, her guests made awkward excuses and began to leave. Mrs. Pemberton muttered something about remembering an appointment. Mrs. Caldwell claimed her daughter needed help with homework. One by one they filed out, leaving Victoria alone in her perfect dining room with its perfect china and crystal, surrounded by the ruins of her carefully constructed social life. That evening, as Victoria sat in her empty mansion, she thought about Maria's words. She thought about the woman who had cleaned her floors with dignity while Victoria had tried to strip that dignity away. She thought about Sophia, the daughter Maria had lost, and wondered what kind of person Sophia had been. She thought about her own children, away at boarding school, and what they would think if they knew how their mother treated the people who worked in their home. But most of all, she thought about the look in Maria's eyes in that final moment. Not anger, not hatred, but something far worse. Disappointment. The disappointment of someone who had hoped for better from humanity and been let down once again. The next morning, Victoria woke early and went downstairs to the kitchen, hoping to catch Maria before she left. But Maria was already gone. On the counter was her uniform, neatly folded, with a note on top. "Mrs. Sterling," the note read, "thank you for the lesson in humility. I hope someday you'll understand that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in how we choose to treat our fellow human beings. I've left something for you in the guest room. Please use it wisely. Maria." Victoria rushed to the guest room and found an envelope on the bed. Inside was a check for $500,000 made out to a local charity that provided job training and support for domestic workers. At the bottom, Maria had written, "In memory of all the Marias who never get the chance to reveal their true worth." But that wasn't all. There was also a business card for a counseling service that specialized in helping people overcome prejudice and develop empathy. On the back, Maria had written, "The first step toward change is recognizing the need for it." Victoria never saw Maria again, but she never forgot her either. The story of the millionaire's wife and her secret billionaire housekeeper spread through Beverly Hills like wildfire. Victoria became a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when privilege and arrogance blind us to the humanity of others. Some say Victoria learned from the experience, that she became a better person who treated everyone with respect regardless of their position in life. Others say she never changed, that she simply became more careful about how she displayed her prejudices. But everyone agrees on one thing. Maria Gonzalez Rivera gave them all a masterclass in dignity, strength, and the true meaning of power. She showed them that real strength isn't about having money or status. It's about maintaining your humanity even when others try to take it away from you. The most powerful lesson of all? You never know who someone really is until you take the time to see beyond the surface. The person serving your coffee might be a poet. The janitor cleaning your office might be working on a PhD. And the housekeeper scrubbing your floors might just be one of the most successful businesswomen in the world, teaching you a lesson about respect that money can't buy. In the end, Maria got her revenge. Not through cruelty or vindictiveness, but through the simple act of revealing the truth. Sometimes the greatest revenge is showing someone exactly who they are when they thought no one important was watching. What would you have done in Maria's situation? Would you have revealed your identity sooner, or would you have stayed to learn the lesson she was seeking? Share your thoughts, because in a world where we're all quick to judge based on appearances, maybe we all need to remember that everyone has a story worth hearing.